I'm Mike O'Neill of Integrated Alliances, and I'm going to share some things that you can do to promote webinars and related things using LinkedIn and related things. How's that? So when I say LinkedIn, I mean, LinkedIn.com, that program that we use to find jobs and to find customers and all, can be used to promote events and to actually house events and do things like that. Okay. So come with me on this journey here. We're going to spend, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes or so talking about the kinds of things that you can do to take your webinar and put more butts in the seat, to get more people there, get them more excited about showing up. Now, first of all, you need to have a registration site, and this is not really a LinkedIn thing. But within LinkedIn, what you do, you're going to have to point to something. So we particularly like Eventbrite. So use whatever you like, but there's a URL you're going to need to know to go to that event registration site. And there's some dressing up out there you're going to need to do to make it look nice and sexy once you get there. And it might involve things like headers and footers and text and graphics and maybe even a video. So you're going to have to get that registration site together first before we can go any further on this journey. Well, along with the registration site, the event itself, and the ideas there, is this concept of a pretty URL, a pretty domain. And this is where you take something that looks kind of ugly, like register.com/ickety-wackety-whack-whack-yak over here. Doesn't look really good, does not inspire people. And if you put a little AF equals number at the end, people get really uninspired when they know that someone's getting a cut of the deal somewhere by putting an affiliate code at the end. But there's a secret to around that, and you really need it in the LinkedIn world here. So the pretty URL says I'm going to spend $7, $10 sometimes. And I'm going to get a URL that looks really nice, and I'm going to redirect that URL to the URL I want to have. Because when I put things out in LinkedIn and I put them out in other places, it's very nice to have something that, kind of repeatable, like denverholidayparty.com instead of blah, 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 .eventbrite.com. You with me so far? So there's another piece to get ready for this journey where we're going to do stuff on LinkedIn to promote your webinar. You're going to need to create some copy, some marketing copy. And this copy is going to be used in your promotional pieces pretty much everywhere. My suggestions are a mix of short sentences and bulleted stuff. These special characters like diamonds and triangles that point to stuff are pretty good to have as well. I always get someone else to look at my text before I do much else with it. Now we're going to get text together here to put in status updates and to put in blog entries and stuff like that, and to play out in groups. So get your text together. It's been a measure twice, cut once kind of principle, and then we'll get on to the next part. Well, after your text, come getting your graphics together, because there are thumbnails and featured images and all kinds of little things and places we're going to want to have an image about that webinar. And frankly, a picture of GoToWebinar doesn't inspire people, but a snazzy picture that would have been captured from a previous webinar, or pictures of the webinar host with the webinar in the background. However you lay that out, you're going to need to have that to go with our graphics, because we're going to go start promoting away on LinkedIn. So one of the first things that I like to do when I'm promoting on LinkedIn, because I've got a big network, it helps me a little bit, and this might be why you might consider a bigger network, is I'm going to send messages to my tier 1 connections about the webinar. Nice thing about a webinar is it tends to be available to anybody, so you don't have to worry here about what you would with a workshop, for example. Because the folks in Texas don't care about that Minneapolis workshop. For the most part, you're going to upset more people and you're going to put extra butts in the seat in Minneapolis if you're going to market outside of the area. So with a webinar, we can do that though. And the way we're going to do this is to craft our message. We got our text. Remember our text? Graphics don't come into play, but we've got our text. And we can actually send a message to up to 50 people at a time. We've got a subject of the text, and then we got the body of the text, and guess what else? Oh, it's great. You can have URLs in it like http:// thisismywebinar.com. Remember that pretty URL principle we talked about? This is where it comes into play. Because frankly, on LinkedIn, I've seen these really ugly, long strings showing in LinkedIn messages, and they certainly don't inspire you to go click. So I hope that helps a little bit. How to do that is a matter of going to your contacts and starting to click on a few, and you'll see a little send message button appear, kind of in the middle of nowhere. LinkedIn has adopted this move your button around or your mouse around and menus appear principle, kind of from Facebook. But the send message principle starts with looking at your own connections, and you'll have to work with it from there. Now, if you're going to do a webinar, you should have a blog post about that webinar, so that within LinkedIn I can point to the blog post as well as the registration site. I've got a few different options. So that blog post that you're going to do out there, we can point to from LinkedIn through some of our communication tools here. So it's nice to have a place outside there that will provide more information on it. Now, Eventbrite does a great job of sort of acting as the blog for it, and it promotes the daylights out of it. So you may not need a blog post if you're using that platform, but if you're using Evite or some of these others, you might want to have a platform out there that's got a little more blogability. And here's my big deal with blogs, is make sure you've got an image you put in there as the featured image. One image, maybe more, but for sure one image. And that featured image will be carried forward when we do some messaging here and there, because those messages go and grab that featured image from the blog and put it in as their featured image. So that's why you want to kind of throw the football ahead of the receiver a little bit with that blog post with featured image. So hope that helps a little bit. We'll see what we can do next. I kind of referred to this a bit already. This is status updates, and there's two types of status updates. For most people, there's two types of status updates. Actually, let me take that back. For most people, you need to know about both types of status updates. Let's talk first of all, we all have profiles. So your LinkedIn profile has a piece in it where you can kind of say what you're up to. And what you're up to could be some words, remember, told you, words, or it could be a link, a link like to a blog post out here, or a combination of all that. So it starts at your home page on LinkedIn. You don't go to your profile, you don't go hunting around the menu options. On your home page, you'll see your little status update window. So as soon as you start to type an HTTP : sort of link in there, you start to see this other space open up, and this is golden. You can have a beautiful looking status update that people really pay attention to. The key is to get a URL typed into the description field, not into the subject line field up there, but in the body of it down here, and watch what happens as you get these other fields that you can do stuff with. So special characters can be involved in there, and the HTTP : / world run amok works really well on LinkedIn status updates. But I said there were two types. Now, if you have your own company, or you can post on behalf of the company, companies can have status updates too. So the same things you can do individually on your profile, you can do on the company page. And who sees that? Well, the followers see that, the employees see that, and there's a whole lot of development happening along the lines of the status updates and company pages. And frankly, company pages in general pay a lot of attention to that coming up, because what I told you there will probably be twice as fancy by the time you even see this. LinkedIn groups can do a lot for you as well. So you have to generally be a member of a group to go do stuff out there. There's these groups that are called open groups where you can kind of be an outsider and get in. But for the most part, you're going to be a member of a group, and you can join up to 50 groups. So this is not the big quantity thing here. You got to kind of be a little selective. And there are tools for you to post updates into multiple groups at one time. Even LinkedIn has some tools internally there. And I might guide you against that a little bit, because each group's a little bit unique. They have different rules, and you're going to want to customize it a little bit for each group. So let's say this posting is going to go into some LinkedIn groups for this webinar. I'm doing this webinar that's of interest to business owners. Okay. Well, in this group over here, they're actually business owners, so I can talk about them as if this is just for them. And in another group, it might be, folks that sell to business owners, and my message to them might be different in the post in that group. So do the posts individually within the groups, but remember, we have our special text that we talked about. And when we talked about our graphics, having those graphics need to be hosted somewhere, like on a blog somewhere, so there's a URL that can point to the image. Because when we're doing some of these posts and all, we want to just point to an image necessarily, not to a post that has that. So a few little ideas there. Now, when you're posting within groups for a webinar, remember, your webinar is going to be over someday. And when it is over, people aren't really going to want to see that anymore, and the group managers aren't going to be real happy with you for leaving stuff out there that's kind of old. It's kind of like roadkill. You got to go get the roadkill and take it off the street. It's your job to do that. So go remove your event afterwards and make for a real happy manager. So if you really are kind of thinking, I really feel strong about this, let me share one other thing with you. Group managers can do things for you. Now, if you own the group, you are the group manager, you can do a lot of things yourself. We own 4 groups. We own actually 8 groups, 4 really big ones. And we can do all kinds of things. So the group manager has something called a featured post, manager special, these things. And if you approach them appropriately, and it seems like it's something that's good for the folks in the group, you could ask them if they might like to feature it, if they might like to like it, make a comment on it. When the group manager does things, more people notice. And it can be actually, sitting up at the top up there where it might normally be floating on down below because the group manager has taken some actions, he likes you or something. So think about that. It's also a good thing when you join a group to check in with the manager and just kind of say hi. We run the groups. I know the folks who say hi. They can do things that I won't let other people do because they said hi. So there's some groups things you can do, and I think commenting on other people's stuff is a pretty good idea. Now, if you're going to put a post out in a group discussion, these are called discussion posts, having other people come like it and comment on it will help you a lot as well. It'll filter up naturally. The more popular discussions appear near the top. So think about, who do you know? 5 or 10 people do you know that you can send a message to and say, here's the URL, by the way, copy, paste. Could you mind just liking it? Comment a little bit. Tell them you're going to go. Say something nice about it. Okay? That's a lot of stuff you can do with LinkedIn groups. LinkedIn gets packaged with Twitter quite a bit. And when you do a status update on LinkedIn, it can kick out a tweet. Literally, there's a little checkbox with a little birdie down there that'll kick out a tweet as well. Now, if you're doing big, fat announcements on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn will give you a lot of space, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of characters, and you're going to tweet it out on Twitter, it's going to get a little crunched. So you might think a little bit about if you're going to really tweet that out there that, maybe I'll just take 2 steps. Let's craft the status update for LinkedIn, and then we'll do a separate one for Twitter. I won't push 2 buttons at one time. Think about that as a pattern to do that. So once again, Twitter is something that's another whole animal, and there's plenty of strategies for it. So I would suggest, for example, that when you do tweet on things that you make sure that you've got multiple accounts that you might tweet here and then retweet from it over here so you can sort of reinforce one another. But that's a call for another day. Well, that sort of wraps up the things that we can do with LinkedIn and some of the related tools out there. I did not cover specifically the LinkedIn events and applications platform out on LinkedIn since they're going away. But you might get some mileage out of them if your event kind of comes up soon and you see this in the right amount of time. But they're goners. They're not going to be part of it anymore. And these other tools are moving a lot more towards the statusing and external things like Eventbrite links and Twitter integration. So anyhow, I'm Mike O'Neill with Integrated Alliances. I hope you learned a few things about how to promote your webinar using LinkedIn.